Om Sadashiva Samarambam Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam Ishvaro Guratmiti Mukti Veda Vibhagine Vyomabda Vyapta Deaya Dakshinamurtaye Namaha Sava Vedanta Sedanta Kocharam Tamagocharam Govindam Paramanantam Satguru Pranatoshmaham Om Shanti 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 Om Namaste. Welcome to our Panchadasi. Last time we have stopped at the list of new ideas, new concepts, notions of yoga, redefining yoga from the angle, from the perspective of Vijnana Yoga, of Vedanta, of the Upanishads. So we actually, the last two classes, we have been going through this list, and it is so juicy that we haven't finished it yet. So the last one we covered was, once the cause is seen in the effect, the self is seen in the object should be dismissed, because we are looking for the fundamental nature of all objects. As we know, Vedanta is about the discrimination between the subject and objects. Everything that contains a name, a color, and a form need to be dismissed, because it's made out of the attributes of Maya. So we want to find out the fundamental cause. And we know that the fundamental cause of every object is beyond Maya, although Maya is the power to produce all names, colors, and forms. The causeless cause, the fundamental essential nature of everything, is limitless consciousness, as we know. So once the cause, limitless consciousness, is seen in the effect, all objects of the world are effects. So once the self is seen in all objects, and then the object should be dismissed. Dismissed means to say it must be understood as an effect of something which is the fundamental nature. We are looking for the fundamental nature, because the fundamental nature of something is that which can never be negated, because it's not part of the cause effect chain that controls mithya. Mithya is causality, is one phenomenon affecting other phenomena, objects, and then cause and effect is the engine of the universe, this moving universe. So we see things, and then we discard them as effects, and then we dismiss them as apparent real, okay? Just configurations of Maya, that which should be dismissed as reality and taken as an apparent reality. It's not that it should be dismissed altogether as non-existent, but it should be dismissed as not really real, but an apparent reality. And then once we do that, and then whatsoever remains is the real. And the real is not difficult to understand, that it is the consciousness behind the intellect doing this very discrimination. The intellect is doing the discrimination. And then even at the end, the intellect needs to understand that even this intellect, which is an effect of something else, which is conditioned by its attributes and qualities, all of this should also be dismissed. And then what remains? Remains the consciousness shining in this very intellect doing the discrimination. Yeah. So that's what remains. My true nature, my essential nature is consciousness. No, this consciousness is what is real. It's what is beyond time and space. And that's the only place, well, it's not a place, but it's the only aspect of our existence that can give us peace and comfort and satisfaction. The mind becomes what it meditates on diligently. The mind becomes what it meditates on with diligence and conviction. Yeah, conviction is a good word, because if I'm not really sure about the self business, this the inquiry, discrimination, it sounds a little bit strange. Maybe it's just another philosophy. It's another good idea, but it does not really go anywhere. It does not take us to a real practical transformation. It's just more mental exercise. So if we still have doubts, and then we are not going to do this contemplation with conviction, with confidence, with certainty, and no, this is the way, I just need to develop this clear, hard and fast understanding with conviction that, okay, that's the way to go. That's what I want to meditate, contemplate. I want to extract the fundamental nature of this body-mind complex, which is, by the way, the same fundamental nature of the entire universe and the entire, the creator as well. The creator, the creation, and the jiva, we all have the same fundamental, essential nature in consciousness as consciousness. The 26, a wise person always understands that the visible and the invisible, including his own body, is only consciousness. So a wise person is the one who have realized the true nature of the self, of the I, of Jagata. He knows or her knows that it's all consciousness, and this consciousness is not an object of the sense organs. Why? Because it is not only invisible, it's beyond objectification, because things that are invisible still can be objectified. We cannot really see our emotions. It's not visible, but yet we can objectify. And the wise person is the one who always understands the visible aspect of this experience, this human experience, and the invisible. The invisible is the spirit. He can see, he understands that the visible matter and the invisible, including himself, this invisible could be the intellect, the emotions, the mind. Everything is only consciousness. So consciousness is beyond visible and invisible, because there are many things in the invisible world that we know they can be objectified. And consciousness is the ultimate objectifier. So it's the absolute objectifier. (27) Anytime if you want to stop for any contribution or question, feel free. The 27, when the objects are reduced to nothing by self-inquiry, the universe appears as awareness. This understanding fills the mind with endless bliss. So here in the end, we have a little bit of this kind of experiential notion of a mind filled with endless ecstasy and bliss and so on. So this is a little bit part of the language of yoga. It makes it more appealing, more attractive. Okay, so we know that in our language, bliss is synonymous of limitlessness. So when we understand the limitless nature of consciousness as our own nature, And then our mind is experienced, with is filled with endless bliss. Bliss is this feeling of completion due to my non-dual nature, my whole complete non-dual nature. This is bliss, is limitlessness. Non-duality means to say there's nothing but consciousness and I am that consciousness. So when we know that we are that consciousness, and then there is nothing to be concerned and so on, and then the mind is filled with this sense of limitlessness, non-duality, and relax, you understand? So that's the meaning of bliss. Ananta is limitlessness, okay? Satchitananta, Ananta is the third aspect that a lot of people want to experience as ecstasy or experiential bliss, but it's the very nature of our own nature, which is existence, consciousness, and limitlessness, okay? So Jesus fills the mind with this confidence in one's full, whole, and complete non-dual nature, okay? So it begins by saying when the objects are reduced to nothing by self-inquiry. So this reduced to nothing has to be taken carefully. Why? Because we know that there is so much talk about nothingness, emptiness, and void, and so on. So the objects are not reduced to nothing. They are being reduced, better said, to not really a thing. You understand? Not thing, no thing, not a thing. The objects are not real objects. And they are not a thing, but they are the very subject. By inquiry, we can understand that the objects, they are reduced to the subject. Objects, in the end, are reduced to the subject because there is only the subject, the light of consciousness revealing this apparent order of reality. And then when we look into the object, and then we understand that they are not really what they seem to be, because fundamentally, they all come from consciousness and they resolve in consciousness as consciousness. So Jagata, Jiva, and Ishvara, they all resolve in consciousness. We see this is all consciousness, it's all Brahman, Paramatma. So that's what it is. And this superimposition, it's just an effect caused by the Mr. Powerful Maya. (28) This process of self-inquiry is called Raja Yoga, or deep contemplation, deep meditation. Okay, this process of self-inquiry in the yoga language, let's say, is also called Raja Yoga. Okay, so you are inquiring, you are meditating, you are just discriminating the object from the subject and resolving the object into the subject. So this process is called yoga, okay, which is Jnana Yoga, which is Nididhyasana or Manana, okay? For those whose worldly desires are only partially attenuated, it is better to combine this meditation, Raja Yoga, with Hatha Yoga. So what the Swami is saying here, this process of self-inquiry, which is called meditation or contemplation. Meditation what? Meditation on the teachings of Vedanta. Before he would say that you should contemplate on the nature of objects and subjects, cause and effect, and learn to dismiss the effects and extract the cause. So it's all about cognitive inquiry. Understand? This is the Vedantic meditation. So we go about doing that. And then this process is called yoga in our terms. It's not like a silence, peace, or or emptiness. It's active, sharp, cognitive process of investigation into the real nature of the self, of the universe, and so on. Please understand, this process is called Raja Yoga, and for those still dealing with Rajas and Tamas, those worldly desires are not fully attenuated by this process. You understand? It's better to combine this contemplation through the intellect, following the logic as presented by Vedanta, with what? With some Hatha Yoga. So you want to work on the intellectual level, but you work on the body level, because as we know, the body-mind is one single integrated organism. So if we have the intellect that is not really sharp and subtle and pure and refined enough, so we need to give some support, doing some Hatha Yoga, because when the body relaxes, the mind and the intellect also relax, and we develop a more sattvic body-mind complex. 29, those whose minds are purified by meditation, contemplation, mentioned referred as Raja Yoga, those whose mind were purified by Raja Yoga will gain self-realization. Purity of mind is quickly attained by devotion to the teaching, to the teacher, and to the self ultimately. Okay, so Swami is closing this redefinition of yoga, saying that the mind needs to be purified by yoga, contemplation, meditation. Okay, so we add to that the mind must be purified by the means of karma, dharma, yoga, which is the most natural purifier of the mind. So those minds purified by karma, dharma, and upasana yoga or raja yoga, okay, you have the three. This is the 5 steps. Okay? Karma, dharma, upasana or meditation, and then shravana, manana, and nididhyasana. So those minds purified by upasana yoga will gain self-knowledge, self-realization. The purity of mind is quickly attained also by devotion. So he's showing there another element in this process, which is devotion. Okay, devotion is a very, very fundamental element, factor in this process. And it's not an independent sadhana. It's not an independent factor. So in order to go through Karma Yoga, Dharma Yoga, and Upasana Yoga, we need to be devoted. We need to be devoted not only to our goal, to our sadhana, to our pursuit. Okay, we need to be really serious and devoted. Okay, we need to have a real value for what we are doing, working for. So devotion has to be there. And this devotion is not only the love for something. When we say the word devotion in our Vedic context, devotion always integrates the creator, Ishvara, or Ishvara 1 or Ishvara 2, however we want to see it, But devotion is the devotion for the creator, which fundamentally is Paramatma, is Brahman, you understand? So in order for the seeker of freedom to be not only an inquirer, but a spiritual inquirer, one needs to bring Ishvara into our process, because we need to develop that spirit, that Karma Yoga spirit, which is fundamental for the neutralization of all the vanities of the ego. The ego survives a lot of this process of understanding if it's not properly resolved into Ishvara understanding. The relationship between the Jiva and Ishvara is essential. It's absolutely necessary for neutralizing the ego sense of doership, ownership, and so on. So the ego is going to be taken care naturally to the extent that we understand Ishvara, that there is a creator. My devotion is to the creator, and it has different stages. And that comes a point that we comes to Vedanta, and then we are devoted to the creator. The creator reveals the scriptures, we are devoted to the scriptures, and the creator reveals a teacher to unfold the scriptures, and we are devoted to the teacher. So the scriptures in Ishvara comes in one single package, because these scriptures come from Ishvara. Anything? So we conclude that way the list of Aparokshanubhuti. I will look into this. You said you have this text, Mark? Did you send it to me, Mark?
Yes. I've got it. I've only got it on book form. I haven't actually got it in.
Okay.
I don't know.
I will look for it.
I don't know how. Yeah, it's great. I've got Swami Paramarthananda's version, and it's beautiful. Yeah, it's great text.
I probably have this book somewhere, or in India, or in São Paulo. Huh? Okay. I need a new text for my coming seminar in São Paulo during the next carnival. So the next set here, the next title here is called Samadhi. So we have touched this word Samadhi. The Swami here on this list has mentioned slightly the difference between Samadhis, and even before that, we have seen Vidyaranya Swami addressing a little bit. Now we're going to look more deeply into Samadhi from the verse 55th and 58th. We are still on the first chapter of Panchadasi. We have to remember that it's 15 chapters, but the first one is 30% or more of the book. When the mind gradually lets go of the idea, I am meditating, and is merged in the self alone, it becomes instead like a flame of a lamp in a breezeless spot. Though in this samadhi there is no awareness of meditator and the object of meditation, the existence of the merged mind is inferred after one comes out of the samadhi. The mind continues to be fixed in the self in a state of samadhi as a result of an effort or will helped by the merits acquired in previous births, which gave birth to strong impressions of vasanas, creates through the constant spiritual efforts to attain samadhi. Okay, let's look into it. When the mind gradually lets go of the idea, I meditate. So we all know what it is to sit down to meditate. We feel like, oh my God, I'm really a little bit disturbed here. There are so many thoughts, and I'm feeling agitated, and I want to calm down my mind, and I want to experience peace and silence. So I need to control this beast, So I want to sit down and meditate. And there begins the battle. The battle is between myself and the mental process, of one thought after the other, disturbing my peace, producing anxiety and expectation and frustration and worries and so on, So now I want to be free of all worry. If I could, I would I would close my eyes and sleep right away, because then I would be free of my worry mind. Yeah? But since I already slept 8 hours and then I cannot sleep, so I need to stay awake and try to control this mind. So, and then there is the meditator, and the meditator is holding on to the thought, I am meditating, I am concentrating, I am regulating my thoughts, I am trying to, control my mind, control my thoughts, So the idea of the meditator is very, very strong, very, very alive and tangible. When we see to meditate, it's almost in the beginning, it's almost like, okay, I'm going to go for this battle once again, I remember in the old days when I say in the ashram of Osho Rajneesh, I say, okay, I'm going to do this meditation. I know it's going to be tough because it's me and my mind, and I'm going to sit for 1 hour facing the wall or doing some vipassana with a group of people. And I don't want to fall asleep because I want to look good. So there was always a feeling that it was challenging, So the meditator is well and alive in doing that. But there is a moment after this meditator, it becomes more and more subtle. And the experience of this meditator is more and more silence and peace. There is a point that this sense, I am meditating, it turns into, I am enjoying, I am peace, I am bliss. So all these thoughts are still define the meditator. Yeah? So this meditator, as it becomes subtle, it's going to have more and more fine, pleasant, gracious experience, until this idea that I am blissfully meditating merge into the self and becomes instead like a flame of a lamp in a breezeless spot. So a flame of a lamp in a breezeless spot is a nice analogy, presented by Vedanta from different angles. When the flame is really like totally unmoving, there is no breath, and the flame is there, and then it is an analogy compared to the mind when the mind does not move. So when the mind does not move, so chances are that the idea of the I am meditate disappears, and it's said that it merges into consciousness and disappears. So the duality, I the meditator, and the experience I am having, the object of experience, whatsoever I am experiencing of meditator, we have this duality, the meditator and whatsoever is the object of meditation. The object of meditation can be very subtle and very blissful. So once the duality collapses, and then it's said that the meditator merges into the self, just like a flame that stops moving in a breathless spot, okay? And then Vidyaranya say, though in this samadhi there is no awareness of the meditator, and there is no awareness of an object of meditation because duality has disappeared, collapsed. So there is no, in that state, there is no awareness of the meditating entity, and there is no experience happening because experience depends on the experiencer entity. The experience disappears because the mind has merged into consciousness, okay? It merged in a deep sleep, the I thought merged into consciousness, and then it disappears, and the same way duality disappears. So although in this samadhi, there is no awareness of the meditator, in other words, there is no thought, I the meditator, oh, now I the great meditator, I am in Nirvikalpa samadhi. No, there is no such a thought because the I disappears. It goes to deep sleep, okay? It falls asleep. It's a different kind of sleep. We are not going to go into the nuance of difference between the deep sleep state and Nirvikalpa Samadhi state. But it's very similar, as the scriptures and our texts often say. So this Samadhi, there is no awareness of meditator. There is no awareness of an experience happening. The existence of the merged mind can be inferred after coming out of the Samadhi. So fundamentally, what is the difference between deep sleep and Nirvikalpa Samadhi? So when we go into deep sleep, the thought, I am sleeping, or I am awake, I am dreaming. When you go into deep sleep, there is nobody there saying, I am in deep sleep, because in deep sleep, the I disappears. The agent disappears. You understand? There is no agent and there is no experience. Okay. So when we go into deep sleep, the I disappears and the object disappears. Okay. So now, likewise, in this Samadhi, there is no the meditator, there are no experience or object of meditation, yet the existence of the merged I, the I merged into consciousness in deep sleep, the I merged in consciousness in Nirvikalpa Samadhi. When we come out of Nirvikalpa Samadhi, when we come out of deep sleep, although I was not there, we can infer that we were in there after we come out of deep sleep, in the same way we infer I was there when I come out of Nirvikalpa Samadhi. Okay, it's the same principle. We can only infer I have been there. And there are several logics that can support this statement. We have gone several times by several of these logics that supports the fact that deep sleep is something that we experience and we enjoy. Therefore, we wish sometimes not to come out, or if we come out suddenly in the middle of the night, we say, oh my God, why? You know, why did you wake me up? Why? Because we are enjoying something there, although I was not there, but I was there. So, okay. So, as I was saying, when I come out of deep sleep, I can infer that I was there. We all can infer that we were there. I mean, we were there, maybe not fully conscious, but we were there because we know that we were existing through the deep sleep state. That's why I went into deep sleep with full confidence that my conscious existence was not going to be a fact. On the contrary, it would be refreshed, rejuvenated, okay? So we go knowing that our conscious existence remains there. We come out. When we come out, we infer. And we infer that we have been there, but not only that, we infer that we have had a lovely experience. Why? Because we wish we could sleep a little bit more and dream less and be less in the awakening state. You understand? So we know, we infer that we were there. In the same way, in retrospective, the mind knows by inference that it was there in Samadhi, okay? The mind did not really disappear. It was merged into the self. So deep sleep is the mind, the I thought merging into consciousness, okay? It appears somehow as a very, 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 very subtle vritti called the pranya jiva, the deep sleeper. This deep sleeper is the slightest variation of free, limitless consciousness, because it belongs to the causal body, okay, which is the first modification imposed by Maya. Are you listening to me, Claudio? I see your pictures freezing. Are you guys listening? I don't know what's going on. Let me go back to the other server here. Okay, can you hear me? No internet. Okay, let's try here. I don't understand because the weekends are the most critical. I had my usual 2-hour satsang yesterday with no such interruption. So I was just saying that that we were there during deep sleep, and it's often said by our text that when we go into deep sleep, we can infer that I was there, and we have two options. One is to say, oh, well, I was there as consciousness, okay? Because I felt a sense of fullness and completion of non-dual experience. There was nothing, there was not even the I thought. Or we can also say that the prana jiva is yet an agent, an experiencing entity, and therefore it's not really consciousness, but it's the closest thing to consciousness, experiencing somehow the absence of objects, or the absence of tangible objects, or the absence of tangible duality, the I and the object of the deep sleep, which is the absence of tangible objects, okay? So we can look at that both ways, and that's what our text sometimes refers to. The mind has merged in consciousness, or the mind of the dreamer and the awaker has merged or has transferred itself to become the prana jiva, okay? So just to make this comparison with samadhi, which reminds me of Ramana Maharaj often telling people to say, don't fall into Nirvikalpa Samadhi here. So he had this incredible radiance, and silence was commonly experienced by most everyone around him. And people's mind would be easily resolved and merged with the self, and people would go into Nirvikalpa Samadhi. And I have read that in some of his books during the years that I was pretty much on everything he had said. And I have heard from Papaji, referring to Papaji's daughter, that used to be often in Tiruvannamalai, and Ramana used to like her very much, and she had a huge tendency to fall in Nirvikalpa Samadhi, and he was keeping telling her, don't fall into Nirvikalpa Samadhi, remain alert, don't fall into the self-induced deep sleep state, okay? But it's curious to see that the yogi, the whole culture, yoga culture in the world, believes that enlightenment is Nirvikalpa Samadhi. In other words, enlightenment is the ability to induce, to self-induce deep sleep state. You understand? Why? Because they believe that if you remove the world, you remove duality and you remove suffering, and it makes sense. Yeah, if you remove the world by inducing a deep sleep called Nirvikalpa Samadhi, you resolve suffering, you resolve all the objects. There is nothing, there is no duality, and one feels greatly refreshed, okay? So, but the point is that once we are there, we do not have anymore the intellect at our disposal to gain a certain understanding, okay? So we need to get a certain understanding that frees us from the samsara, frees us from suffering through the three states. We don't want to depend on a single state, because nature has given us three states or four states, has given us sleep, dream, awaken, and nirvikalpa samadhi, which is a self-induced deep sleep. So if I say, no, I will take only one of these states and I'm going to call that moksha. But, how long can you stay in one of those states? Nature is going to keep changing those states. And then the yog, unavoidably, it feels unenlightened every time he comes out of that particular state. You understand, Mark? So going back to this verse, Vidyaranya Swami continues saying that the mind continues to be fixed in the self in the state of nirvikalpa samadhi as a result of an effort of a will of self, of will effort, an effort of will. So the mind continues to be fixed in the self in a state of samadhi as the result of an effort of will. So we have two things helping here. We have our present willpower effort. I want to create a deep meditative state, silence, peace, because I want to experience nirvikalpa samadhi. There are people who live an entire life or more than one life trying to achieve nirvikalpa samadhi, which is not an easy achievement. And here the Swami is saying that the mind continues to be fixed in the self, merged in the self, disappears in the self, in this state of nirvikalpa samadhi, as a result of an effort of will, plus helped by the merits acquired in previous births. So one is born with vasana for nirvikalpa samadhi, okay? One is already born with that vasana, and then one comes, that vasana is going to compel the individual to try to experience nirvikalpa samadhi. Is going to put up an effort. Okay, I hear about nirvikalpa samadhi, it sounds familiar, I want to see what it is. Without knowing, he has already a huge vasana. He has nirvikalpa samadhi merits acquired in previous births, okay? So he has a vasana for nirvikalpa samadhi that's going to be associated with his will effort, okay? And then that is going to create this samadhi as a piece of cake, very, very easy. I'm putting up my efforts, and I already came with a huge vasana. The vasana in this case is seen as acquired merits from previous births, okay? These strong vasanas through the constant efforts to attain samadhi in previous births, okay? So we all have some spiritual vasanas, otherwise we would not be in contact with the Vedantic scriptures. We all have. And most of us have a vasana for jnana yoga, knowledge. We have a certain understanding or value for knowledge, okay, rather than experience. Otherwise, we would not be with Vedanta, okay? So we come with those vasanas, and then those vasanas helps us to find our way and bring forth our efforts to further develop those vasanas, and that way to achieve self-knowledge and freedom. Swami Paramarthananda says Samadhi is not a mystical experience. It is a spontaneous absorption in the object. And Swami Paramarthananda, I heard him say a few times, sometimes it can be any object. We can be in Samadhi by being totally absorbed in one single object. So, of course, when our object is the very nature of the meditator, the self, and then duality really collapses because the self is non-dual, you understand? And then duality collapses. But it can be any object is going to produce a certain kind of samadhi because it's going to eliminate all other thoughts, no? Because you are holding on to one object, it's going to be totally absorbed. I don't want to say the word wrongly again. Huh? Absorbed. Okay. So the mind will be totally absorbed in the object of meditation. Okay, it can be any object, as Swami Paramarthananda sometimes says. It's just a total love for the object. In this case, the love of the self. The meditator forgets his or her presence during the process of meditation. There is no thought, I'm thinking of this or that, I'm meditating on this and that. So the meditator just loses itself into the meditation. I don't know if you guys have ever had the experience of using dance for the sake of meditation. So I was around Osho Rajneesh, and we had this meditation. We used to dance a lot in those days because Osho Rajneesh used to say that the dancer disappears and the dance alone remains, okay? So we had certain meditations. One of them was called Nataraji. Most of our meditation had some dancing or moving. So it comes a point that you are dancing, and somehow it's relatively easy to disappear as a dancer. And then when you come back, you'll see that you were in samadhi because only the dance remained. And it used to be a wonderful experience, you know, in retrospect. The meditator, Sufi dance as well. Sufi brings about this mystical experience as well. The meditator forgets his or her presence during the process of meditation. There is no thought, I am meditating, I'm thinking. There is only the world of the object, your object of meditation, and the self is the best object of meditation, the idea of the self, because the self is not object. We have to symbolize the self, you know, around certain notions and concepts about the nature of the self. So the inquirer, totally absorbed in that flow of notions and concepts about the nature, limitless nature of the self, the inquirer becomes lost, absorbed in that contemplation, which becomes more and more real because the self-conscious subject, the I thought, is suspended at some point during the concentration. The impact of I am consciousness is much greater in the absence of the conscious subject. Okay, so there is it's said here that there is an impact, I am consciousness, when the ego is absent. When the ego is present, the thought I am consciousness is still somehow polluted by the ego who is claiming I am consciousness. But when the ego is clearly suspended, okay, and the thought is there of limitless consciousness, the only reality, and then the ego is not there to claim it, okay, to co-opt it, and then it's more easily realized. The impact of I am consciousness is much greater in the absence of the conscious subject, the I thought, the ego. The momentum from the contemplation makes willpower unnecessary. Now going back to the idea that every action creates results of actions, and these results of action is called tendencies or predisposition, which is a kind of momentum, or tendency, okay? So the momentum from this contemplation makes the willpower almost unnecessary, because it comes to a point that vasanas takes over and it drives us, it rides us, to our goal. It again reminds me of Osho Rajneesh, because he used to say, so my effort here, I mean, of course, he was an entry-level guru, but he was saying, my effort here is to help you to grow to a point that there is no return, because he wouldn't explain, because you developed enough of spiritual vasana that's going to take you to your final goal. So that's the idea of the momentum from your effort, from the contemplation, will make willpower unnecessary, almost unnecessary, because there is this natural vasana, this natural tendency, and then things begin to happen effortlessly, It reminds me of my own process when meditation out of the blue began effortless to me when I least expect. This is momentum, it's vasanas that was somehow working their way and then creating a certain momentum that makes our willpower not anymore a struggle, okay, with our unspiritual vasanas. Thoughts are there, but they are too subtle to be noticed. Since they are not deliberately entertained, it does not feel as if there are thoughts. You can later infer that you were there once the Samadhi ends. You may think that the Samadhi referred in the verse 37 is Savikalpa Samadhi because of the phrase continues to be fixed. When it's not the verse, it is in the list there or not. No, it was the verse. Let me see the verse 37. This is very far back. Unconscious discrimination, 47.
No. It's verse 57, Arlindo.
It's 57, huh? I think it is a mistake, yeah.
It says 57, yeah.
Yeah, it is.
The mind continues to be fixed in the self as the state of samadhi, as a result of the ego. As a result of an effort of will, helped by the merits acquired in previous births, and strong impressions created through the constant effort to attain samadhi.
Yeah, okay, it's the 57. We've seen that samadhi 55 to 58, you're right. Yeah, so when we hear that the mind is there in the state of samadhi, and that you can infer that you were there, and then what is said here that you may think that the samadhi referred in the verse 57 is Savikalpa Samadhi because of the phrase continues to be fixed. So the mind is fixed without the willpower, without the ego making any effort to fix it on the self. The mind, as we have said before, it's somehow it merged into the self. It's sucked into the self. It's absorbed into the self. okay? So the mind continues to be fixed. It seems to imply conscious somebody efforting into fixing the mind, but no, or holding the mind, no. It refers instead not to Savikalpa Samadhi, but to Nirvikalpa Samadhi, because the very verse attributes the fixation of the mind not to an effort now, but as a momentum from the previous efforts in the previous incarnation, but not only in previous incarnation. Now there is a momentum from efforts from the past decade that I have been working on purifying my mind and trying to attain a certain state. So all of that creates a vasana, a predisposition, a tendency, a momentum. And then when you see what happens, the effort is not as much necessary. So that was not referring to Savikalpa Samadhi, because the mind was fixed into the self without a conscious effort of a nice thought, because it was an unconscious moment that was fixing the mind in the self due to previous efforts. You understand the momentum? And that's to say that it was Nirvikalpa Samadhi. The fixation of the mind was being done by one's spiritual vasana, the momentum from our previous efforts. Are you following okay, Claudio? Okay. It refers to the Nirvikalpa Samadhi because it attributes the fixity of the mind to the momentum of previous efforts. If the mind is focused by momentum, the focus is unconscious. That is to say, it is a natural effort. So this takes me to another aspect of our teachings, which is discrimination. It needs an effort up to a certain extent. Once the discrimination has grown roots into the causal body, likewise, the discrimination becomes natural. And the sadhana of the yoni is the most natural. Why? Because it's coming from that vasana. There is a momentum, okay? There is a huge satyamitya vasana, a huge discriminating vasana. And then when you see the effort, the momentum, the vasana is working for you. So I often say that self-knowledge or this discrimination needs to grow roots, not only in the conscious mind, but in the unconscious mind, so that it can work for us, rather than us working to produce the discrimination, to produce the satyamitya discrimination. It goes naturally. That's what it says here. If the mind is focused by momentum, meaning to say, if there is a vasana which is doing the fixation of the mind in that state of samadhi, it's this focusing is unconscious. It means to say it's natural. Okay, natural is that which comes from our fundamental nature. Okay, what is our fundamental apparent nature? Is our program, our vasanas. Okay, so now we want a wise vasana that's going to produce this unconscious discrimination so that it is natural. So we are being operated by a spiritual vasana and such a mitya discriminating vasana, and then it becomes natural. You understand this angle of nature? All other living creatures, they are natural. The nature is the three bodies, and the causal body contains the program, and it's going to operate each one of these equipments of these creatures, okay, from its nature, the causal body, okay. So we want to have our nature, our causal body, with those kinds of vasanas, so that effortlessly the moment of those vasanas work for us. So therefore, it is unconscious, so that is to say it's natural, and there will be no conscious will affecting the after. The length of the samadhi depends on the momentum of the initial effort into the punya karma, the vasanas from previous births. So we have to have a momentum on the initial effort, and then we need punya karma, spiritual karma from previous births that cause addiction to the teachings. Okay, so we are talking about samadhi here from different angles, not just nirvikalpa samadhi, because we are bringing in, this is a commentary probably coming from James. It says that the length of the samadhi, because there are different aspects of samadhi, and the most natural samadhi is called the sahaja samadhi. It's a samadhi in which the mind is overall relaxed, the world is appearing, and it's seen as apparent reality, meaning to say it does not really affect me, the mind and consciousness, because the mind is under the effect of the knowledge I am consciousness. So the mind is cool, the world is appearing, the mind is properly resolved without being put to sleep, and it's resolved because it's understood, it's true nature, it's fundamental nature. So the length of this natural samadhi, let's say, is based on a momentum of the initial effort into the good karma or punya from previous births that causes what? Causes this addiction that it could be said it is extreme value for the teachings of the Upanishads. So we come here with a value that was put here as a certain addiction. It grows to become an addiction, but usually when it comes from previous births, it appears as a tendency. This tendency is going to produce the initial effort, okay, that we say, okay, I have a tendency and I want self-knowledge and freedom. I don't buy in samsara. I don't believe I can be happy here. I don't really share the same value. So I have this momentum. It's an initial effort. And then on that, I have my vasanas from previous births who are going to bring even more fuel into the fire of my mukshatva, my desire to do my sadhana and be free. So the previous births that cause addiction to the teachings, instead of different punya karma. There are some punya karmas that are also considered punya, but for example, materialistic punya karma. So materialistic punya karma is going to produce prosperity and a certain level of material comfort, but it's going to keep your mind engaged in the world, extroverted through all the pursuits and so on. So the next three verses are the fruit of nididhyasana according to Yoga Sastra. So it's getting nicer and nicer, our Panchadasi. I guess we should stop here. It's already past 4. If any one of you have anything to say, be my guest. Claudio, I don't see you're falling asleep anymore, huh?
Yeah, I create a vasana for not sleeping.
Very good.
But I can never be sure. So.
Because you have another vasana for sleep, huh? Okay.
Yeah.
Okie dokie. Thank you. So I say goodbye. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Again, thank you. Thank you, my friends. We meet again soon. Ishwara willing. Namaste. Big hug.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ciao, ciao.
Ciao, ciao.